The boy had only used the simplest sword draw/slash skill, yet the three top masters of the continent were completely stunned on the spot. Was this truly the kind of power a 12-year-old child should have? And yet, just 2 days ago, I was still the invincible king of mercenaries, but because of my ruthless defiance, I became the Empire's target for sacrifice. They quickly gathered forces from all sides and secretly plotted an assassination. In the end, outnumbered and overwhelmed, I still fell to their hands. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying on a hard wooden bed. Disbelieving, I touched my own neck. Just a moment ago, I had clearly been slain by Aiden, but now there wasn't a single wound on my throat. Looking closely, my face even seemed to have returned to its younger years. By all logic, I should have been dead, yet the familiar surroundings hinted at an answer in my heart. Just then, a man dressed as a soldier suddenly pulled open the curtain, telling me to quickly pack up and return to the Pedium territory. A strike landed on my heart. I was right. I had truly returned to the past. Pedium was the very family that had long been destroyed. Because I was chosen early as the heir, I had always resented the family's restraint since childhood, often doing many reckless and foolish things. Over time, most of my clansmen chose to stay away from me. In the end, unable to bear their condemnation, I ran away from the family. For many years afterward, through sheer effort, I built up my name and power, eventually becoming one of the 7 world powers as the king of mercenaries. In order to make up for my mistakes as a child, I returned to Pedium's territory, only to find nothing but ruins. I personally witnessed the land of my family burn to ashes. From then on, I ceaselessly hunted the culprits who had destroyed us, until finally I was ambushed and slain by Aiden from behind. Only then did I learn that it had been him who had joined forces with the Edmund family to annihilate Pedium. And now, it seemed I had returned to the time before I left my family. At this moment, the servant beside me noticed something strange, his face full of doubt, as if I had become a different person after just one night's sleep, even letting out strange laughter from time to time. Soon, I learned from the servant that this was the time when the Pedium family was launching its campaign against the orcs. In my past life's blurry memory, most members of that expedition perished in this war. Back then, eager to establish prestige, I used my status as the family's eldest son to forcibly seize command authority. After all, intelligence had reported that only 3 orcs were involved. But in reality, over 20 orcs appeared. Due to my poor leadership, the entire expedition was nearly wiped out. But now, I could rely on my previous life's mercenary experience to deal with this battle. When I arrived near the front, a huge explosion erupted in the distance, followed by countless orcs charging through the thick fog. At the sight, the seasoned commander shouted loudly, signaling the soldiers not to panic and to hold their defensive formation. In the next moment, I suddenly stepped forward, both hands gripping my sword high, and with a crushing momentum, I slashed down toward the orcs. The commander was stunned. The eldest son, long dismissed as useless, was hiding such terrifying skill? Truthfully, I was not very satisfied with my current strength, because I had not yet learned to use spirit energy, meaning I couldn't even unleash 1/10 of my former power. Stepping before the commander, just as I had in my past life, I told him to hand over command of the troops to me. His face hesitated. In such a dangerous moment, how could I still have the mind to cause trouble? Yet, because of my status, he couldn't openly refuse. After some thought, he still rejected me, which left me troubled. But if I were in his shoes, I too wouldn't easily hand over authority to a reckless man. So this time, I didn't intend to forcibly seize control. Instead, I walked up to Commander Sphinx and asked him one question. Did he know what mattered most in battle? Without waiting for his reply, I told him, it was momentum. In a flash, my sword in hand lashed out like a serpent, and with a single strike, I felled another orc. At that moment, all the orcs seemed enraged, roaring hideously with fangs bared. Yet I continued relying on my agility, weaving through their attacks. The sight left Sphinx dumbfounded, as if he were dreaming. Orcs, usually so powerful, fell before me like mere vegetables. Even if he could use spirit energy, he doubted he could suppress them as I did. On closer inspection, he noticed my body was already fatigued, yet I still unleashed precise and ferocious strikes with minimal movement, every blow landing perfectly on its target. Without even using spirit energy, my swordsmanship alone could already surpass the masters of my family. The soldiers nearby could no longer hide their astonishment. They had thought I would only drag them down, since who could have guessed the spoiled, reckless heir possessed such swordsmanship? What's more, the orcs were starting to show signs of wavering. At that moment, I mocked them in a provocative tone, calling them brainless weaklings, before suddenly retreating. Sphinx finally realized my intent. I was luring the orc somewhere. Ahead was a sheer cliff with no way out. He quickly ordered the soldiers to raise their shields and follow my lead. About 2.5 minutes later, I finally saw Sphinx's figure. In an instant, I used all my strength to leap, as the soldiers locked into a flawless formation and pushed forward together, driving the orcs off the cliff. With a thunderous crash, the orcs plummeted onto the rocks below, their bodies torn apart. But drained of strength, I too fell from the cliff, plunging into a void. In the fragments before me, a young girl's voice kept calling my name. I recognized these shards. They were memories of time spent with my younger sister, Alina. When I regained consciousness again, I was still lying on that familiar hard wooden bed. I hadn't died. It must have been Commander Sphinx who caught me at the last moment. Yet in the very next instant, I felt as if my body had been struck by lightning. This must have been the result of pushing my body to its very limits in battle. Suddenly, just then, a girl dressed as a maid pushed open the door. She was delighted to see that I had woken up. When I lifted my eyes toward her, I realized it was my tutor, Linda. Since childhood, she had always been by my side. But after the family's destruction, I never saw her again. I rushed forward and hugged her tightly. To live a second life and still be able to see my familiar loved ones again, it felt truly wonderful. After the joy settled, I decided to tell Linda something. In the days to come, the PDM family would face an unprecedented crisis, because the soul within my body now came from 10 years in the future. Linda, however, didn't take my words seriously. She thought perhaps I had been overly shaken in the battle with the orcs. To her, the one about to face a crisis was not the PDM family but myself. She quickly scolded me for my reckless behavior on this trip. If Commander Sphinx hadn't caught me in time, I might already be lying lifeless. Afterward, she nervously asked if I would attend the celebration 1 week later. Her worried expression drew my gaze. Every year at this time, the family held a grand banquet celebration. My younger sister, Alina, had once invited me to join. But in my past life, because of the failure of the expedition, I had no mood for festivities, and so I failed to prevent the tragedy of Alina's death at the banquet. That regret haunted me for nearly half of my life. Just then, hurried footsteps sounded outside the door. Before my mind could react, my body had already moved, pulling the newcomer tightly into my arms. But in the next instant, Alina pushed me away. Because I had done many foolish things in the past, my relationship with my sister wasn't close. Yet in this life, I swore to make up for my regrets. With some embarrassment, I apologized to her, telling Alina that I should never have spoken to her in such a harsh tone before. My words froze both Linda and Alina in shock. For the arrogant eldest son of the PDM family to actually apologize, it made them wonder if perhaps my head had been damaged by the orc battle. After that, I followed my sister to the square to oversee the servants preparing supplies for the celebration. Since the PDM family lacked manpower, even Alina, the young lady of the house, had to do much herself. For me, besides helping my sister share the burden, I also wanted to learn more about the family's internal affairs ahead of time. In my past life, Alina's corpse had been discovered in the slums far from the celebration. I suspected she must have been lured away or forcibly abducted. That night, I went to the training grounds the family had assigned to me. It was the first time in both of my lives that I had set foot there. Such conditions were no problem for me now. After all, the training grounds of the mercenary camp had been far harsher. I also owed much to my teacher, Greg, who had maintained my equipment since I was young. In childhood, I had stubbornly believed everyone around me was my enemy. Looking back now, my vision had been far too narrow. Regarding the events of the celebration day, my memories had already returned in fragments. If I wasn't mistaken, the one who killed Alina was a young master from another family. That incident dragged the PDM family into interclan conflict, marking the beginning of its downfall. In the time before the celebration, I needed to at least reach the level of using spirit energy. Spirit energy was a supernatural resource that allowed humans to transcend their natural limits. Normally, sensing and accepting spirit energy was the hardest step. But in my past life, I had done it amidst the chaos of the battlefield, making the formation of a spirit core as natural as breathing. Still, a single spirit core would never be enough to return me to the ranks of the 7 world powers. In that life, I had obtained half of a magic tome, and with it, I eventually formed multiple spirit cores. I lost track of how long I trained, until I suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. Perhaps because of my current body, I could only form 3 spirit cores instead of the 5 I once achieved. And though the technique in the magic tome accelerated my progress, it drained my body greatly. In my previous life, that was the very reason I lost to Aiden. If it had been one-on-one, I would have surely won, but I faced the continent's strongest Knight Order instead. The advantage now, however, was that this body was still young. With time, I could cultivate even more spirit cores, and when the day came to face the culprits who destroyed my family, I would not falter. Soon, the day of the family celebration arrived. As promised, I found Alina. In these days, I had come to understand one thing. As my actions changed, so too did the reactions and thoughts of those around me. While the main events remained the same, subtle differences emerged. That meant even if I knew the future, I would still need to adapt flexibly. After about 2.5 hours, the celebration was nearing its end, yet not a single suspicious figure had appeared. Suddenly, someone approached Alina, saying there was a special event this year and inviting her to join. Without hesitation, Alina agreed. Watching their backs as they walked away, I fell into thought. No wonder Alina had let her guard down in my past life. It turned out there was a traitor within the family. Worse, they were her personal guards. In my past life, they had died alongside her, so I never suspected them. This time, I followed them closely to the place they mentioned. But the scene before me was nothing but desolation. No event was being held here. Glancing around at the terrain, I realized this place was cleverly chosen to cut off all escape routes. By now, Alina had lost patience, believing her guards were playing a prank. How could anyone choose this place for a celebration? She grabbed my hand to leave, but a tall figure suddenly blocked her path, glaring coldly and telling her to wait. The look in his eyes sent chills down her spine. He seemed like an entirely different person. One of them, named Philip, no longer bothered to hide. With a cruel grin, he revealed that they had accepted a generous commission. But before he could finish speaking, 3 figures slowly emerged from behind him. As 3 figures emerged, the leader, Frank, seemed slightly surprised because he noticed that I was among the targets. The burly Philip stepped forward, declaring that they had fulfilled their promise and brought Alina here. He urged Frank to quickly settle the payment. I watched their transaction with a grave expression. Did they really think that selling us out would allow them to walk away safely from here? Philip scoffed at my words, claiming the reward was enough for them to escape Pedium territory and live comfortably for the rest of their lives. But in the next moment, a flash of sword light swept past his face, and before he could even finish his words, Philip was dead. Seeing this, his companions hastily grabbed Alina, threatening me to drop my sword immediately or face dire consequences. With a sharp thud, a sword pierced straight into his forehead. The 3 men across from me were left dumbfounded at the sight. Although they had come from other territories, they had heard the rumors that the eldest son of the Pedium family was a complete good-for-nothing. Frank's face now carried a faint look of admiration. He had realized that I had just unleashed a spirit energy attack. Enduring the ache in my heart, I knocked Alina unconscious, because what would happen next would surely be too cruel for her to witness. Frank stepped forward slowly, first thanking me for dealing with 2 of his problems. Originally, he had planned to dispose of Philip and the others himself. Now, however, he was curious whether I had been concealing my true strength, because I seemed nothing like the useless failure of the rumors. I did not answer him, instead fixing a cold stare upon him and his remaining allies. The 2 beside him would not be difficult to handle, but the real threat was Frank. The spirit energy radiating from him made it clear that his strength was on another level. At that moment, Frank changed his mind. He decided not to kill me but to leave me broken and alive, without a single part of my body unscathed. He believed that only in this way would the Pedium family descend into utter madness. I tightened my grip around my sword hilt, and in the next instant, my body pounced like a leopard. In one swift motion, my blade struck with precision, piercing into the forehead of a black-clad man. Then I spun around, using my greatsword to block a heavy strike. The moment my opponent exposed a flaw, I brought my sword down mercilessly. A flash of blood burst forth as the second man's head was severed from his body. Frank could no longer stay composed and charged at me. With a turn of my wrist, I unleashed a probing arc of sword energy, leaving a blood mark across Frank's neck. Cold sweat poured down his face. Had he not reacted in time and used his spirit energy to shield himself, he would have already fallen. No longer holding back, Frank revealed the full extent of his power, sneering at me. Though he could not understand how someone my age could wield the blade so skillfully, he vowed that he would not allow the Pedium family to have such a capable successor. At his words, I allowed a faint smile to appear on my lips. The next moment, I seized an opening and lashed out with a kick that landed squarely against Frank's abdomen, forcing him back several steps in disarray. Yet his expression turned smug. He had deliberately exposed that flaw, never expecting my attack to be so feeble. He felt no pain at all. But as he spoke, his face suddenly turned pale and crystalline. Blood gushed from his mouth as he collapsed to his knees, eyes filled with agony and unwillingness. My strength had pierced through his spirit energy. I strode forward, my long sword glowing with spirit light. Since you dared to target the Pedium family, you should have already expected such consequences. With a wave of my hand, I unleashed the combined force of 3 spirit cores. Frank's body froze instantly, his eyes wide with disbelief. How could my spirit power grow to such an overwhelming degree? In the next instant, our figures clashed once again, and with a single strike, Frank's sword shattered in his hands, his right arm trembling from the impact. I gave him no chance to regret, thrusting my sword straight toward his chest. As he struggled for breath, I seized him by the collar, demanding he reveal the mastermind's identity. Stubbornly, he refused to speak, forcing me to drive my blade into his core and begin draining his spirit energy. Frank's face twisted in madness as he realized what I was doing. He thought me insane. Any mishap could cause the energy to backfire, reducing everything around us to ruins. But just as his spirit energy was about to collapse, Frank could endure no more and finally revealed the name. The infamous Count Desmond, a man who controlled several powerful families, including the Descartes family whose lands bordered Pedium territory. Desmond intended to use this scheme to spark conflict between the 2 houses, and once war broke out, with allied forces, they could crush the Pedium family completely. Having obtained the answer, I did not hesitate, driving my sword fully into Frank's chest. With his dying breath, Frank sneered that even if this plan had failed, it would not prevent the eventual destruction of the Pedium family. Since you are about to die, let me share a secret with you. I was reborn, and this time I will protect the Pedium family. Afterward, I carried Alina into a nearby abandoned house. According to my past life's memory, a body was hidden inside. From Frank's words, this corpse had been planted there by the Descartes family. As expected, the body belonged to the overlooked young master of the Descartes family. In my past life, he had been framed for Alina's murder, a scheme to ignite war between the two houses. Count Descartes had even sacrificed his own child to fuel the plan. Now, before anyone discovered the truth, I needed to erase all traces of the setup. Once everything was dealt with, I carried Alina away silently. Meanwhile, in the family council chamber elsewhere, a heavy silence hung in the air. News of the plan's failure had already reached them. Reports confirmed that even Frank, their strongest enforcer, had perished at the hands of the Pedium family's eldest son. Enraged, they resolved to eliminate me next, staging it as a duel that would look perfectly natural. And now, the moment had come. There was a suitable candidate, a young man named Ross from another family. He was renowned for his strong physique and his innate talent with the sword. When it came to weapons, almost no one of his age across the northern continent could withstand his blade. They brought Ross in and promised that if he could carry out their plan, they would support him in becoming the next head of the Ross family. All he had to do was provoke me into a duel and then create an accident during the fight. To prevent suspicion, someone would be disguised as Ross's attendant. Time quickly passed, and the next day arrived. I trained even harder than usual, because Frank's words had left me with a deep sense of crisis. If I could not quickly restore the strength of my previous life, it would be extremely difficult to deal with those families. Although I could now draw out my spirit energy like threads and use them in combat, it was still only possible under the condition of releasing my spirit energy core, and I would need more time in practice to reduce the problem of excessive energy consumption. The knight beside me watched with surprise. He had been a knight for most of his life, yet it was the first time he had seen me use spirit energy in such a way. Later, I went to the dining hall and joined Alina for dinner. Yet tonight's food was far too plain. At that moment, noise and shouting came from outside the window. Because Alina had been kidnapped recently, my father had ordered the cancellation of the Pedium family celebration. This action caused resentment among the merchants who relied on the festival to earn money. Now they had come demanding an explanation. The merchants had to be calmed quickly, otherwise, if this unrest continued to spread, they might take actions that would harm the Pedium family. Soon after, I overheard from the knight beside me that the family currently had no available manpower. To rebuild the forest of magical beasts that had been destroyed during the recent campaign against the orcs, most of the knights had already been dispatched to participate in reconstruction. This was why the merchants dared to seize this chance to stir trouble. No wonder in my previous life, the Pedium family was swallowed up so quickly. With the fortress in the north forcing the family into constant war, and the magical beast forest on the other side often producing beast rampages, the family had been unable to withstand the drain on its finances and manpower. I pulled Linda aside and asked if he had been managing my reserve funds. But Linda could only reply helplessly that he had not, because long ago my habit of spending recklessly had led my father to cut off all my financial resources. In other words, I was now completely penniless. This troubled me greatly. If I wanted to prevent the family's fate from repeating, I would have to build my own power. Yet I did not even have the most basic starting capital. Just then, a servant rushed up to me in a panic, breathlessly telling me that Ross was looking for me. When I stepped outside, I found that Ross had nearly beaten the gate knights half to death. At once I remembered who Ross was, the heir of the Ross family, our so-called allies. But he was never friendly toward the Pedium family. Every time he came here, he caused trouble, yet no one ever dared to stand against him. Aside from his overwhelming strength, his excessive self-confidence made him admired by many. In the past, I had always been his tag-along, following behind him. Now Ross found it strange that I seemed so quiet today. Normally, I obeyed him without question. That was when I suddenly remembered that much of my past reckless spending had actually gone to paying for him. Now was the perfect chance to make him cough up that money. I strode up to him quickly and demanded, "Don't you have something to return to me?" Extending my left hand, I told him that with interest, he owed me a total of 1,000 gold coins. Immediately, Ross refused to acknowledge the debt, claiming that everything I had given was my way of flattering him, voluntary expenses for friendship. I cut him off, warning that if he didn't want me to beat him up in front of everyone, he had better pay me back the 1,000 gold coins. The words had barely left my lips when Ross stood up and sneered that I was dreaming. As the heir of my family, I spent my days in debauchery, and before long I would likely be stripped of my inheritance. There was no way he believed I would dare strike him in public. Before he could finish, my fist slammed hard into his chest. A crack of breaking bone sounded, and Ross's expression twisted in pain. As I looked down at him coughing blood, I remarked coldly, "It seems I overestimated you. You can't even defeat me, the so-called useless failure of the Pedium family." At that moment, the knight standing behind Ross stormed forward in fury, accusing me of destroying the alliance between our two families. Ross no longer bothered pretending to be injured. He laughed and declared that he wanted to duel me. I held a rotten fruit at his face, saying that if there was to be a duel, It should be initiated by me. To my words, Ross gladly accepted my invitation. I then turned to the guards and ordered them to summon the merchants at once, for there was now a golden opportunity for them to make money. Soon after, Ross and I entered the central duel arena. This duel happened to perfectly fill the gap left by the cancelled family celebration, and members from many other families had come to watch. After all, a duel between two family heirs was always worth seeing, especially since one side was none other than Jesse, the so-called useless young master. The merchants seized the chance to sell their wares. Ross, however, was displeased, saying that I had turned a sacred jewel into a marketplace, and therefore even if I surrendered, he would not hold back. I cut off his nonsense, reminding him that since I was older, I was his elder brother, so it should be the younger brother who launched the first attack. Ross looked annoyed. Before the fight had even begun, I had already claimed all the advantages. He let out a furious roar, his body rising high as he swung his sword down. I quickly raised my greatsword in front of me to block. The clash of blades shook the air. Using his brute strength, Ross launched wave after wave of ferocious attacks, while I relied on agility to dodge left and right. To the spectators, it looked as though I was surely doomed. From the very beginning of the duel, I had been completely suppressed by Ross. At that moment, his strike landed heavily, sending my body flying high into the air. But only a second later, I twisted midair and reappeared behind him. Your so-called swordsmanship is nothing more than brute strength. True skill with the sword is determined by precision and control. My words made Ross lose his composure entirely, for to him, it sounded as if I was mocking him as nothing but a muscle-bound fool. You muscle-brained fool. My figure flickered like a ghost, weaving in and out through the shadows of the swords. It didn't take long before deep bloody holes appeared all over Ross's body. This sudden reversal left the spectators gaping, their mouths wide open in shock. Was this really the so-called useless heir they had heard so much about? Before the duel even began, they had wagered all their bets on Ross. Then I tossed aside the longsword in my hand. Beating you like this isn't fun at all. From now on, I'll fight using only my fists. But I'll double the wager. 2,000 gold coins. My declaration made Ross's attendant breathe a deep sigh of relief. He had thought the plan was about to fall apart again, but now my demand seemed like heaven itself lending him a hand. Ross suddenly stomped down hard and shot toward me like an arrow released from a bow. I calmly shifted my body and easily dodged his fierce strike. Taking advantage of the moment when he pulled his blade back, my left fist shot forward, slamming hard into Ross's stomach. The immense force made his entire body tremble violently. He couldn't believe it. How had my strength become this formidable? I grabbed his body and drove my elbows into him again and again. Ross was pummeled so mercilessly he couldn't fight back at all. His arms flailed in panic, trying to block, but in the end he nearly got beaten into a swollen mess. I seized his head in my grip. I'll tell you this, before the Ross family meets its ruin, it's still the ally of the Pedium family, because our fathers were once good friends. Yet you, as the family heir, dare harbor treachery, colluding with outsiders. At that moment, Ross recalled how he had once asked his father why they still supported the Pedium family. His father's answer had been simple, because they are our allies. Seeing that Ross had been thoroughly taught his lesson, I stopped throwing punches. The result of the duel was clear. I had won the final victory. Just then, Ross's attendant rushed up from below the stage. He had never expected Ross to be so useless, and now their deal was finished. By the next day, I received repayment from Ross himself, nearly 3,000 gold coins in total. A chest full of gold, enough to hire a small mercenary band. Yet this was far from sufficient. I needed a way to make money continuously. At that moment, my younger sister Alina crept up behind me and asked if I was rushing to earn money because I wanted to give my fiancé a big surprise. I froze. Fiancé? Since when do I have a fiancé? Linda gave me a speechless look, assuming I was simply being shy and pretending not to know. Then fragments of memory came back to me. If I remembered correctly, that so-called fiancé was Amelia from the Raybird family. With her gentle nature and her actions that went far beyond her noble status, she had gained the support of many common folk in the territory. Yet in truth, she was the very culprit who would one day incite rebellion. She had even joined Duke Edmund's plot to swallow up the Pedium family. Secretly, she was known as the Witch of the North. I quickly asked Linda when my father was expected to return to the capital. The answer was about a week. I began mapping out my own money-making plan, leaving the capital and heading toward the Raybird family's lands where Amelia resided. Meanwhile, Amelia herself was handing her own shoes to a barefoot little girl. Turning to her attendant, she commanded that in her territory, everyone must have shoes to wear. She ordered new homes built for those who had lost them and food prepared to last more than half a year. All of this, of course, was meant to shape her image as a benevolent ruler in the hearts of her people. Not long after, Amelia returned to the family courtyard, where her guard Bernard was crouched down washing her feet. Amelia's father demanded unconditional obedience from the territory's residents, but in reality, the people preferred to follow a ruler who kept them clothed and fed. Bernard quickly agreed, praising Amelia's recent deeds as brilliant. things that would surely help her in the competition for succession. But suddenly Amelia stomped her foot on Bernard's face. Enough with that talk. Tell me, what exactly happened with your duel against the Northern Sword? Bernard hurried to explain that he had held back out of fear that winning would draw unwanted attention and reveal Amelia's presence, which would be disastrous at this time. Amelia then asked about the operations of the Ector merchant group. Recently, all the rebuilding materials needed for the Pedium family's lands after the battle with the beasts had been purchased from them. The profits earned were nearly enough to replace the annual aid the Raybird Count sent to Pedium. The merchant group had also recruited many soldiers who had deserted from Pedium, some of whom were very powerful. This made Amelia extremely satisfied. This time, you did well, Bernard. But until your strength is fully matured, you must not expose your true purpose. At that moment, a servant hurried over. Lady Amelia, the eldest son of the Pedium family, requests an urgent meeting with you. 2.5 minutes later, the scene shifted to the reception room. Amelia scolded me for being discourteous. Even if we are engaged, a meeting must still be requested in advance. I chuckled. I only came to wish you an early happy birthday. I wanted to give you a surprise, so I didn't think much about etiquette. As I spoke, I handed over a bouquet I had prepared. I bought this from a nearby merchant group. The fragrance suits you perfectly. If you ever want to buy flowers again, you should go there. Amelia casually asked the merchant group's name. The moment I said Ecton, she immediately rose to leave, for that merchant group was under her own command. Since she had received my gift, she excused herself, saying she had important matters to attend to. Suddenly, my gaze hardened and a wave of murderous aura burst forth from me. Sit down, Amelia Raybird. The sheer pressure made Amelia feel an unprecedented weight. She never imagined that the so-called useless fool who once didn't even dare speak before her could now, with just a single sentence, make her tremble in fear. I slowly picked up a teacup. Besides delivering this gift, I also intend to ask you for 10,000 gold coins. Amelia froze. Was that the real reason I had come, just to borrow money? But judging by my tone, it seemed I planned to do so under the name of the Pedium Count. I gave a cold laugh. This money has nothing to do with my father. To be frank, I came here to extort you. My face brimmed with confidence. You'll never marry me. Just like the guard standing outside the door right now. Once you become the Lord of Raybird, maybe he'll end up as your real husband. And in a situation where the competition for the heir of Raybird is so intense, if I expose the fact that you've been secretly building your own power, what do you think the other heirs will do? Lady Amelia. Amelia remained extremely calm. Even if it's just a joke, you'd better not say such things carelessly. I cut him off directly. No need for so much nonsense. If you give me 10,000 gold coins right now, I'll keep your secret. But if you don't, I can't make any promises. Hearing this, Amelia immediately called Bernard over. I knew in my heart this guy wasn't easy to deal with. In my previous life, he didn't have much reputation among the Northern Watchers. But in reality, he already had the potential to rival the greatest sword of the North. So Amelia must have intended to kill me, having Bernard silence me. But I wasn't someone to be taken lightly either. I immediately warned them, if I die here today, our two territories will surely erupt into a great war. None of us can afford those consequences. But Amelia didn't care in the slightest. My death today would be officially recognized as a family guard executing a scoundrel who harassed the young lady of the house. At this moment, I hadn't yet noticed the danger behind me. Just as I drew my weapon to face Bernard, a suit of armor behind me suddenly burst open, and an assassin with a dagger lunged at me. Luckily, my reaction was fast. I quickly flipped back, dodging, and kicked a stool into the air to block the sneak attack. While he was still in midair, I slammed a kick right into his groin and sent him flying straight out the window. This scene shocked both Bernard and Amelia. I let out a laugh. Quite a way you have of entertaining your guests. But with tricks like this, you think you can threaten me? With that, I grabbed my weapon and charged straight at Bernard. While attacking, I shouted at him, as a knight, do you not understand the meaning of chivalry? Bernard, however, looked completely indifferent. He claimed I had threatened Lady Amelia's life, and as a personal guard, he naturally had the right to execute me. As he said this, he locked my weapon with his arm and thrust his sword at me again. I quickly twisted away, slipping free, then countered with a kick to his waist, sending him flying. It was only then that Bernard realized something was wrong. The intelligence he had received earlier was false. He had thought I was nothing but a useless braggart. But the skills I just displayed were far beyond what a novice could have. Amelia's expression turned cold and serious. Don't tell me you can't even beat this so-called waste. Otherwise, after today, someone else will take your place. Bernard thought for a moment but swallowed his words. Determined to remain at his lady's side, he resolved not to hold back anymore. In an instant, a shocking surge of magic burst from his body. The sudden change startled me. I hadn't expected him to already be this strong. Taking advantage of my momentary distraction, Bernard swung his sword toward my neck. I barely dodged by instinct, but his blade still cut across my face, leaving a wound. Bernard gave me no chance to breathe. He unleashed a storm of furious strikes, forcing me on the defensive. Clearly, he was trying to push me into exposing an opening and finish me in a single blow. I knew I couldn't keep defending like this. The next moment, Bernard tried to trap my sword with his arm again, but that trick didn't work on me twice. I twisted away once more, but his reaction was just as quick. He suddenly grabbed my leg mid-movement and slammed me hard onto the floor. That's when I realized something. I couldn't use the same move twice against him. He would adapt instantly. As his greatsword came crashing down, I rolled my head aside, kicked his blade, and used the rebound force to spin myself out of danger. Bernard sneered. So, the young master of Pedium has been hiding his strength all along. But my skills weren't refined knightly techniques. They were mostly moves I had honed fighting mindless monsters. Useful in chaotic battlefields, maybe, but against him? Useless. Which meant I shouldn't expect to leave this place alive. Inside, I worried about how much longer my magic could last. My chances of victory weren't high. But after this exchange, I realized one thing. His sudden thrusting feints disrupted my sense of distance. I had to widen the gap to find an opening. Slowly, I gathered magic in my hand. With a loud bang, a massive sword smashed down on Bernard's head. I lunged forward and struck him with another heavy blow. Just as I prepared to deliver the killing strike, Bernard snapped back to his senses and forcefully blocked my attack. With brute strength, he knocked me flying. In a flash, he rushed to Amelia's side. My lady, leave through the back door now. From this moment on, he could no longer guarantee her safety. As Amelia retreated, her expression grew more and more fearful. Earlier, I had casually mentioned her merchant guild. That meant I knew far too much about her. And if the rumors were true, that I had once single-handedly defeated 5 assassins sent after Arya, then I was no ordinary man. She had no idea how I'd grown so strong in such a short time. She couldn't tell if I had just been pretending to be weak all along. But one thing was certain. She couldn't let someone who knew her secrets, and had humiliated her, leave here alive. Fortunately for her, she had already arranged for family guards to be lying in ambush nearby. With a single command, she could flip the situation instantly. Yet just as Amelia was about to reach the ambush point, her expression turned to pure horror. The guard she had placed there had already been wiped out, by a figure in a black cloak. The cloaked figure slowly turned around. Long time no see, Lady Amelia. Amelia recognized her instantly. Wasn't this Linda, the maid who had always been by her side? But she had no time to think. Her only thought was to run. Too late. Linda flickered behind her in an instant, a blade pressed against Amelia's neck. Lady Amelia, you'd better behave yourself. Linda noticed the spider at the corner of Amelia's mouth and plucked it off, crushing it beneath her boot. She had once overheard the family's conversations. As a child, Amelia had always been bullied by her siblings with spiders. That was why she raised so many around her. Whether she kept one at her lips to overcome her trauma or as some kind of grotesque display, Linda didn't know. But to her, it was disgusting. Saying this, she tore away all the spiders Amelia kept at her mouth and threw them to the ground. And now, Amelia was needed to cooperate with him in completing something. At the same time, Bernard decided to unleash 100% of his strength. A dense surge of magic burst out from his whole body. Then he gripped his longsword tightly and slashed at me. Although I managed to dodge in time, I had to admit this guy's swordsmanship was indeed top tier. Every strike pressed me with immense pressure. I seized the right moment and suddenly swung my sword, aiming straight at Bernard's forehead. As Bernard dodged to the side, his massive hand gripping the sword thrust toward me again. This time, however, I didn't choose to block with distance, but instead directly took it head-on with my shoulder. That action left Bernard utterly stunned. Was I really prepared to take an injury just to twist the blade's trajectory with my shoulder? This made him instantly realize one thing. The eldest son of the Am family from the mainland was indeed hiding something. Immediately after, Bernard quickly took his chance and landed a heavy kick on my waist. He sneered coldly. Even so, an amateur like me could never compare to someone who had trained solely with the sword like him. I ignored him, quickly working out a countermeasure in my head. From the current situation, Bernard was relying on overwhelming speed and relentless attacks to seize the upper hand, then waiting for the perfect chance to break the rhythm with a grappling counter. By locking us into head-on exchanges, he created the illusion that our swords were chained together, inseparable. Although with my current magic I couldn't stand toe-to-toe against Bernard, I did have a unique method of cultivating mana. As I thought about it, my body suddenly erupted with an extremely dense magical aura. Slowly, a third core began to emerge. Before Bernard could even react, I instantly struck with my sword and, with a loud clash, knocked his weapon flying. Bernard was utterly shocked. He could already feel the surging waves of magic spreading from me. As much as he didn't want to admit it, today's battle was indeed my brilliant victory. Just then, Linda entered the room, bringing Amelia with her. Amelia, still visibly displeased, snapped, "Whether you want 10,000 gold coins or something else, take the money and leave immediately." I chuckled coldly. If you had come a moment later, your loyal guard might have lost his life. Now, to make up for my wasted time, I'll be taking double from you, 20,000 gold coins. Once the deal is done, I'll leave your territory. Amelia, however, decided to go all in. She had to find a way to erase me from this world completely. At that moment, Bernard came up with an idea. Why not report this matter to Count Depain? But before he could even finish speaking, Amelia slapped him hard across the face. How many times have I reminded you? Don't you know how terrifying Count Depain is? Once he finds out, we'll be the first to be discarded. Not long ago, Amelia had secretly signed a contract with Count Depain behind her father's back. As long as she helped him destroy the Pedium family, he would fully support her rebellion against her own clan. But if this matter leaked prematurely, Amelia would completely lose her influence within the family. And now that I had learned about her merchant guild, I very likely also knew about her allegiance to Count Depain, perhaps even the secret contract itself. Therefore, before any of this was exposed, they absolutely couldn't let me return alive to Pedium. At this time, Bernard suddenly recalled something. My body was already covered with stab wounds from his sword, and I had just expended a massive burst of magic. It was impossible for me to recover to full strength in such a short time. After some thought, Amelia decided to carry out an assassination plan. Under her command was a specialized assassination corps designed for such circumstances, codenamed Ocelot. Amelia marked a coordinate on the map and ordered 15 men to guard that location. Bernard immediately understood. The spot on the map was the only road from Raybird territory to Pedium. The area was sparsely populated and the terrain narrow, making it the perfect place to silently eliminate me. Meanwhile, in a carriage, I quickly treated my more severe wounds. With the 20,000 gold coins I had just obtained from Amelia, plus the money I had already earned, these funds could serve as the foundation to rebuild Pedium. It was a pity, though, that I hadn't been able to kill Amelia. But even if I had, a territorial war would have been inevitable. I couldn't let momentary anger ruin the larger plan. Thinking carefully, leaving him alive might actually be the better option. The Merchant Guild matter alone was enough to restrain him. Not to mention, I also held some other secrets from his past life that no one else knew. Just then, a wave of heat surged in my throat, and I suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. As expected, forcefully unlocking the third core had caused backlash. It seemed I needed to quickly find a way to boost my mana output. Although the symptoms were far lighter than before, the damage each time was still irreversible. At that moment, Linda suddenly grabbed my hand and produced a silver needle from nowhere. My mana channels inside were in complete chaos, and she could help me stabilize them temporarily. Without hesitation, she began piercing the needle into my palm. In the next second, I felt an even stronger heat than before, but this time what I expelled wasn't blood. It was a strange gas I had never released before. Soon, I could clearly feel the flow of mana in my body becoming much smoother. This made me begin to doubt Linda's true identity. Across 2 lifetimes, I had never thought much about her background. With her strength, why would she remain as a maid in Pedium territory? But since she was someone my mother had arranged to be by my side, I had always trusted her completely. Now that I knew she was far more powerful than she seemed, it was actually good news for the territory. After all, the more strong allies I had around me, the safer we were. At this point, Linda asked her question. No matter what I did, she would always assist me unconditionally. But now I had to tell her why I demanded so much money from Amelia. I answered casually, of course, because the territory needs funding in far too many areas. My words left Linda utterly shocked. Because of my extortion, Amelia had chosen to call off our engagement. In her view, this was a terrible trade, losing a marriage alliance for some quick money. Worse, if Count Raybird learned of it, it could affect relations between the 2 territories. I, however, remained calm. Don't worry too much. Amelia absolutely won't dare tell her father. Linda, exasperated, pressed, then at least tell me what exactly you plan to use the money for. Without even thinking, I gave an answer no one had expected, to develop the forest of magical beasts. At that, Pax, upon hearing my plan to expand into the forest, immediately shook his head in protest. Young master, absolutely not. That land had never been successfully developed by the Pedium family since the time of my great-grandfather. Before Pax could finish speaking, I cut him off. What about the matter I asked you to investigate earlier? Seeing how determined I was, Pax no longer tried to persuade me otherwise. The person I was searching for was indeed in the place I had mentioned. My expression immediately grew serious. If I wanted to survive, returning to Pedium right now was absolutely impossible. Amelia had surely set up an ambush on the only road back. Linda quickly patted her chest, assuring me that she and Pax would definitely protect me. I waved my hand. I know I can rely on you both, but this time you need to come with me to meet someone. In the blink of an eye, we arrived at a small house. The old man who opened the door eyed us warily. Who are you? Linda whispered to me, Young master, are you sure it's really this man? I had just nodded when the old man turned to walk inside. At that moment, my voice rang out slowly. Respected former commander of the Ratatosk Mercenary Corps, Jillian, would you be willing to speak with me? At the mention of that name, the old man whipped his head around, and Pax and Linda instantly reacted as well. Only knights who had mastered nearly every weapon could join Ratatosk. Though the Corps had long since disbanded, their reputation as fierce warriors remained legendary across all territories. Right now Jillian radiated killing intent. What exactly is your purpose here? Linda immediately stepped in front of me, sensing the dangerous shift in his demeanor. But I didn't care. I know how to cure your daughter's incurable illness. If possible, let's talk inside. Jillian's daughter, Rachel, suffered from a fatal disease known as eternal punishment. Crimson spots spread across her body like flower petals, and when the fit struck, she looked like a sinner being condemned, hence the name. In my previous life, I had tried to seek out Jillian to recruit him, but by the time I arrived, he had already died. Rumor had it that after losing his daughter, he abandoned all will to live. As we stepped into the house, Rachel's illness suddenly flared. Jillian could only clutch her tightly, trying to ease her pain. Looking around, I noticed only a few weapons remained. Clearly, Jillian had sold everything he owned to treat his daughter. There was no time to dwell on that. I needed to prepare the antidote immediately. Just then, Linda grabbed my shoulder. Young master, this really is eternal punishment. But even the priests can't cure it. I spoke firmly. Don't worry. I'm confident I can cure her. I handed him a note listing herbs and instructed him to buy every single one without omission. Linda glanced at the list and her eyes widened. Could it really be true that I could cure the incurable? The truth was, while eternal punishment was still considered untreatable in this era, in the future a cure would be discovered, and the method was surprisingly simple. It caused a worldwide sensation at the time, which is why I remembered the recipe so clearly. The only problem was that the required ingredients were extremely expensive. Soon Linda returned with all the herbs. I quickly chopped the elf's blessing together with the other plants, placed them in a vial, and poured in distilled spirits to let it steep for a while. 2.5 minutes later, I handed the potion-filled bottle to Jillian. If you trust me, let your daughter drink this. Jillian hesitated briefly but then gave it to Rachel. As soon as the medicine took effect, the crimson spots on her body began to fade. Jillian's eyes went wide. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. After checking again and again that it wasn't a dream, he finally asked, "How did you do this?" Even the priests had no way. I explained, divine power isn't omnipotent. It mainly enhances vitality and regeneration so the body can resist illness on its own. That's still different from a direct cure. With a heavy thud, Jillian dropped to his knees before me. Then, my daughter will recover. I assured him, I can't speak for every case, but within 2 months, she'll be fully healed. Hearing that, Jillian sank to one knee. You came here today because you wanted to find me, didn't you? My body is useless now, but even if you want me as a slave, I won't object. I slowly extended my right hand. I'm not looking for a slave. I'm looking for the former commander of Ratatosk, Jillian. At that, Jillian understood instantly. All my effort had been to invite him to join me. Without another word, he grabbed a massive axe and began chopping off his long hair. Linda and Pax were stunned. Moments ago, he had looked like a shabby old man, but now, standing tall, his presence was utterly transformed. Suddenly, Jillian picked up a spear and asked, "Young master, have you gotten yourself into trouble recently?" I nodded. Yes, a bit. And there will likely be more in the future. Before I could finish, Jillian poured magic into the spear, hurled it, and charged into a nearby grove. With a pull of a rope, he dragged a cloaked man into the house. Seizing him by the throat, Jillian demanded, "Who sent you here?" The man refused to speak. I suspected it was Amelia's doing. Just as I was about to draw my sword, Jillian stopped me. "Leave this kind of dirty work to me." After dealing with the cloaked man, Jillian once again knelt on one knee. "From today forward, Jillian will follow you." Linda muttered in confusion. She couldn't understand why I would recruit someone so dangerous. Meanwhile, news of the cloaked man's death had already reached the Ocelot smuggling syndicate. Their leader, Leopold, didn't believe it at first. That useless young master of Pedium? He couldn't even detect a scout, let alone kill one. But his men quickly explained. According to the returned intel, it seemed Jillian had joined them. Leopold's face darkened instantly. Is this true? Upon confirmation, he sneered coldly. "So, Jillian, you finally came out of hiding." My good former commander. As we rode the carriage back toward the territory, Boleyn was clearly displeased, since Jillian insisted on bringing every weapon with him. He had no choice but to buy another carriage just for them. I comforted him, saying not to worry. It wasn't a waste, since we would need one to transport Rachel anyway. What truly concerned me was how to make it safely out of the canyon. Linda's expression grew serious. If it's confirmed that the cloaked man was sent by Amelia, that could be a problem. The mask he wore bore the totem of the Ocelot Syndicate, one of the most powerful guilds in Raybird's territory. They specialize in smuggling, and also deal in vile trades like trafficking. Many of their members were once part of skilled mercenary corps. So, it was still a dark organization with frighteningly strong combat power. That made me even more suspicious of Linda's true identity. From the time I could remember, he had always stayed inside the castle. How did he manage to obtain such information? It was at that moment that 2 mounds of earth suddenly rose behind the carriage. Jillian instantly grew alert. Sure enough, members of the Wildcat Syndicate were hiding beneath the dirt. With a swift swing of his massive axe, he blocked their ambush. Then, locking weapons with one of them, he twisted forcefully, severing another man's arm in the process. At the same time, a giant tree suddenly came crashing down from above. Quick as lightning, Jillian yanked the reins to halt the carriage. The next instant, a group of Wildcat Syndicate members sprang up beside us, led personally by their boss, Leopold. Right then, he sneered coldly at Jillian. "Old Commander, it's been a long time. Back then, just for your daughter's sake, you disbanded the mercenary corps without a second thought, leaving your brothers wandering for years as drifters." Jillian only replied flatly, "I don't know what you're talking about." Leopold flew into a rage. "Don't tell me you've even forgotten your own men." Jillian had no desire to argue further. The title of commander of the Ratatosk Mercenary Corps is long behind me. Now, I belong to the heir of the Pedium family. Leopold gave a sharp signal, and his men rushed into attack. Seeing their overwhelming numbers, I asked Jillian if he needed help, but he only shook his head, saying they were clearly here for him, and he would settle it alone. With a mighty swing of his axe, he instantly cut down 3 enemies. Then, drawing a blade, he struck twice more in quick succession, felling those who flanked him. Leopold frowned deeply. He hadn't expected the old man's combat strength to remain so fierce. He quickly ordered his men to attack all at once, giving Jillian no chance to breathe. Mounting a horse, Jillian pulled away to gain distance. Empowered by the steed, his combat ability surged higher. Just as the battle reached its peak, Leopold suddenly leapt down from above, attempting a sneak attack. Jillian raised his shield with one hand, blocking it with ease. Leopold immediately hurled 3 concealed weapons, aiming for the warhorse. Yet Jillian reacted with astonishing speed, evading them once more. He repeated firmly that he had long abandoned the title of commander, and now served under me, Lord Gazelle. Grinding his teeth in fury, Leopold spat, "Then you'll die here together with him." Ever since Jillian went into hiding, the mercenary corps had dissolved on its own. For survival, many brothers had no choice but to resort to vile means. That left Leopold filled with resentment. If Jillian hadn't abandoned his post, the Ratatosk mercenary corps could have become the strongest on the continent by now. As he spoke, Leopold's movements grew fiercer. With a spinning kick, he shattered Jillian's shield. Still, he ranted endlessly. "I gave my entire life to Ratatosk, and you abandoned us to become a slave to some spoiled young master." He flung 3 more concealed weapons at Jillian, but Jillian's battle instincts carried him safely out of harm's way. After the fight dragged on for some time, Leopold smirked wickedly. "So what if you used to be the boss? Now, worn out by worry for your daughter, you've wasted your body away. Meanwhile, I've grown stronger with every battle I fought." Slamming his weapon into the ground, he spun, channeling force into his motion, and hurled another 3 concealed blades. With no way to evade, Jillian had to block them with his arm. Then he seized Leopold as he charged in. "So you came after me for this? Just for this reason?" Leopold froze. Jillian's hands suddenly glowed with magic, gripping the sharp blade directly. That meant he had never fought at full power until now. Murderous intent flashed in Jillian's eyes as he brought his axe down with a devastating blow. When Leopold lay gasping on the ground, Jillian finally asked, "If you wanted revenge, you've had plenty of chances. Why choose this moment?" Leopold explained with ragged breath, "I did come looking for you before, but then you were just a useless, worn-out old man. You no longer bore the shadow of the Ratatosk commander. You weren't worth my blade." Hearing this, Jillian didn't finish him off right away. Instead, he tossed Leopold's weapon back to him. Though Jillian was now my subordinate, he had once been part of Ratatosk as well. He would treat Leopold with the honor owed to a former comrade. Leopold charged again, shouting, "I've waited too long for this day, old commander." But no matter how desperately he fought, he couldn't harm Jillian in the slightest. Dozens of exchanges later, Jillian had him pinned down again. With one swift motion, he wrenched away Leopold's weapon and drove it straight into his heart. As Leopold lay dying, Jillian spoke softly, "I will always remember you, Leopold Bolanos, captain of the 5th Division of Ratatosk." Witnessing this, I leapt down from the carriage. "You've done well, Jillian." But Jillian's face was filled with guilt. He regretted taking so long. Yet these men had once been his brothers in arms. I cut him off gently. "I know what you want to say. Perhaps this is everyone's fate. Don't blame yourself too much." At that moment, I felt incredibly fortunate to have Jillian under my command. He was even more exceptional than I had imagined. In my previous life, when I decided to become a mercenary, It was stories of Jillian's feats from veterans that laid the foundation for my rise as the mercenary king. 2 days later, we finally returned to Pedium territory. Jillian gazed at the city gates. So this is Pedium's domain. I nodded. What's your first impression of Pedium? Jillian stammered a little. Feels not bad. I shook my head. Honestly, Pedium right now is in poor shape. The houses are terribly old, and even some farmland has been abandoned. Villagers capable of farming have all been drafted into the army, so the fields here are practically left in forced fallow. Only then did Jillian speak his true thoughts. He had heard that Pedium was constantly at war with northern barbarians, and now he saw the situation was even worse than he had imagined. I patted my chest in reassurance. This will change soon, but I'll need your help for what comes next. Before long, our carriage arrived at the gate. I froze. Standing there to welcome me was my father. He had just returned from the front lines, but without wasting a word, he summoned me straight into the family council chamber. As I stepped in, I saw his 3 old subordinates locked in a heated argument. The Knight Commander Randolph, the Treasurer Albert, and the Steward Homer. The 3 of them were always quarreling endlessly over the smallest matters. This time, their argument was about Father's decision to retreat from the front lines. At the root of it all, it was because the support funds had run dry. In the past, everything relied on Count Raybird's contributions, but ever since they began conscripting soldiers and stockpiling grain, the money given to Pedium had grown smaller and smaller. That was why Father had no choice but to withdraw the troops for now. I glanced at Father's hand holding the teacup and suddenly noticed how weighed down with exhaustion his shoulders were. This was the burden he had to bear as the lord of the land. Though I had always resented him since childhood for being harsh and unyielding, after decades of life as a mercenary, I had long come to understand the hardships of adulthood. At this moment, Father took a sip of tea and mentioned that he had heard I hadn't been in the city for a week. He suspected I had run off to another territory to cause trouble again. I casually replied that I hadn't stirred up any trouble, only that I had gone to deal with some matters regarding Amelia. Hearing this, Father's expression lightened considerably. He also heard that I had personally dealt with the culprits behind my sister's attempted assassination, Jerome and Philip. Before I could respond, Randolph immediately scoffed. Impossible. The young master himself couldn't have executed them. Those two must have fought each other, and he simply reaped the benefits. It's nothing but a rumor twisted into saying he killed them alone. I understood what Randolph was thinking. Even though those two were already confirmed traitors, the fact that one of his own knights had been taken down by me, the so-called useless heir, was something that gnawed at his pride. Thinking it best to cooperate, I nodded and agreed that what Randolph said wasn't wrong. To my surprise, Father still expressed his approval of me. No matter how it happened, Elena being safe is thanks to you. Your actions are enough to show the dignity of the Pedium family's heir. Hearing this made me uncomfortable, especially since it was the first time Father had ever publicly praised me. I quickly seized the chance to put forward my request, but Albert cut me off before I could finish. He declared that if I wanted to use this as an excuse to lift the restrictions on my allowance, he would be the first to oppose it. Randolph agreed as well, pointing out that with all the trouble I had caused before, like burning down the city gates out of a bad mood, or killing a warhorse just to eat meat, there was no reason to trust me with more money. Those were indeed things I had done, and clearly, they remembered every last one. I stood up and said firmly that all I truly wanted was his approval for one thing. I planned to cultivate the forest of magical beasts. The answer I received was a unanimous rejection from Father and the 3 elders. With no other choice, I returned to my room to meet with Linda and the others to prepare for action. Although Father had not granted his consent, the reason I had asked him was not to gain his permission but out of respect. Linda did not quite understand why I was so fixated on developing the forest of magical beasts, but I could not reveal the truth to him yet. If this matter were to spread now, I would be put in an extremely disadvantageous position. That was because near the entrance of the forest lay a massive Rune Stone mine. Rune stones were rare minerals that could drive any mage into a frenzy. From magical tools to alchemy research, anything involving magic required rune stones. In the past, only the Duke of Pine's household had known of this secret. But now, I alone knew of the mine's existence. If we could succeed in cultivating and securing it, the Pedium territory would surely be able to overcome its current crisis.